So as you can see right behind me is the heart of it all, Media City, with BBC, ITV, and of course, the University of Salford. Let's get in there. This wasn't how I intended my first year of university. Could you believe it's been 8 months since I first started university? I sure can't, and because of that, I'm going to run down through 20 key life-changing moments throughout this past year. Don't worry, it's not like a Watch Mojo video or anything, and because of that, all of these picks are either in chronological or sometimes completely random order. And with that out of the way, let's get started. This was quite a huge moment in life, going into the actual campus, and despite being far away as I'm commuting, it's well worth the trip most of the time, and Media City itself is equally appealing being around BBC and ITV. Now, because of... I actually didn't go into campus for most of the year, but instead had to work from home, catching up with online lessons, meetings, and work, but very quickly managed to get into a routine. Around every day in the weekday, I'd usually work from 10 to 5, with some days prioritizing on a single module. But it can be a bit wackier when deadlines are approaching, especially even having to work at the weekends at times. But because I'm working at home, it led to using software through remote desktop. The only problem being that at most times, it doesn't work. Not even Citrix seems to be functioning well at my end, and because of that, it led me to going into campus via the library to get on with work. Due to... We've had a lot of huge restrictions, and at one time it felt like a new lockdown was announced every time I opened my wardrobe. But I did manage to get into a routine of sanitation, wearing masks, and social distancing. The latter I already got accustomed to. When I first learned about the 12 principles of animation in depth, it really opened my mind to see how I could make my own animations more appealing and exaggerated. It even gives me more appreciation for my favorite animations. But when I implement these into my own animations, it was much harder than it looked. When I managed to get into campus, I went to the stop motion studio a couple of times and knew what to do after my vast experience with the concept with Lego. But clay was more challenging, yet still fun. However, I got feedback from one of my lecturers, Joe, who is a former Cosgrove Hall animator, stating that I should be aware of the staging and speed of the animation in the future. With this one, I surprisingly managed to get along with this very well. It may have to do with previous experience with 3ds Max, but I got to grips with the software quite well. Whilst the standards and 3D printing were a breeze, Buckid was quite a challenge, but still managed to pull through. It was very interesting seeing how much animation has evolved throughout the past century, even learning about animation going further than the likes of Disney and even Fleischer, with some still holding up today, as others were products of their time to say the least. Of all the animation discussions recommended by my lecturers, this Meet the Puppets interview with Phil Tippett was my personal favorite. Famous for stop-motion sequences in film, including the AT-AT walkers from The Empire Strikes Back. During the interview, he stated that you should take time with your projects and do what you love to do. This section in animation was really interesting to see an illusion of real life in 2D, and even making my own Multiplane later on in the year. It might not be perfect, but it gives me a head start for the Multiplane's capabilities, and thanks to that, I can never unsee it. And speaking of Multiplanes, Akira. This film impressed me with its very fluid animation and how great it looks for 1988, as well as its action-filled moments, and even some great Multiplane too. Despite wonky lip-syncing in the English dub, Akira is not only a really good 80s action anime, but a beautifully animated one at that. When first doing this at the start of the year, it was extremely difficult doing this due to online learning. But throughout the year, managed to get used to it and get along well with my teammates, and the next topic perfectly demonstrates this. For one of my modules, I went to Peel Park near the main campus and went into groups for that as well. During our time there, we noticed how desolate and bare bones the park was in terms of things to do. For that, we made a 3D open world in Mozilla Hubs, adding in more content, including a skate park, smoothie stand, and even a wall for graffiti. The past year had lots of great animations like Wolf Walkers, which everyone went on about, and surprisingly for me, the new SpongeBob movie. But the best easily has to be Soul. Not only is this a beautiful film inspiring viewers to live their life to the fullest, but also is the best looking animated film I have ever seen, personally reflecting how far CGI or even animation itself has come. If you take out the characters, I'd be convinced this is real life footage. For my essay in animation context, I decided to look at freeze shots in anime like Spirited Away and Neon Genesis Evangelion, and it went through a lot of changes, especially rewatching Evangelion for its complex plot. Originally discussing the use of freeze frames in general cinema, but evolving into a term called the Japanese concept of Ma, making for a much more interesting read in my opinion. Now for this one, I had to tell a self-contained story with 2 characters only within 90 seconds. I really enjoyed the challenge of the runtime, but just like my essay, the story went through a lot of changes, but paid off at the end, and I could definitely see a story unfold in my animatic. For this, I have previously went in depth with this quite a while ago on a learning journey to improve my drawing skills, fulfilling the solid drawing principle, and simply, I went from here, and a few tutorials later, I can definitely see the difference constant practicing and implementing the solid drawing principle can make. With animating Buckid, I got too used to straight ahead animation thanks to, again, my previous experiences with LEGO stop motion. And because of that led to my animations looking a bit off. And because of that experience, I learned how important it is to prioritize on keyframes first and tweak the passing poses afterwards. Whenever I feel confident about my work, I send it to my lecturers to get feedback. After receiving tips on how it can be better, I actually add said feedback into it. It may have been hard and stressful, boy it has been stressful, but it shows that my animation is just getting better through time. After all, this is only my first year. A lot of times, I'm really impressed with what I have produced and really tend to underestimate my capabilities. I hope that next year that I will be producing much better animations like that and continue my progress, as well as seeing what other new animations will come this way. Thanks for watching.